ADD, or attention deficit disorder. It suffers run the gamut from unfocused underachievers to astonishing overachievers, including the likes of Thomas Edison and Benjamin Franklin. Yet despite the fact ADD has been receiving a lot of attention lately, many of those with the disorder aren't even aware that they have it. Dr. Edward M. Hallowell has put this baffling syndrome into perspective as co-author of the new book, Driven to Distraction. And he joins us this morning. And good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
Why don't you just start out the basic. What is ADD?
ADD, which is not altogether a scary syndrome, is a neurological syndrome characterized mainly by distractibility, impulsivity, and restlessness. Now, obviously, you have to have those symptoms more than the average person in order to qualify for the diagnosis.
So in other words, though, it's the part of the brain that what? That keeps our attention? Is it getting not getting enough signals, or?
Right. Those parts of the brain that have to do with focusing attention and regulating impulse control are relatively under-perfused with the neurotransmitters we need to keep on task, and so the tendency toward easy distractibility or impulsivity.
You just said it's not always scary. I just pointed out that you have these underachievers that have real problems. Then you have these astonishing overachievers. How do we explain that?
Well, again, it's in the nature of the syndrome, the waxing and the waning. And each of the symptoms has its positive and its negative aspects. If you look at impulsivity, for example, the flip side of impulsivity is creativity. What is creativity but impulsivity gone right?
Yeah.
And hence, each one of the drawbacks tends to have its positive flip side.
I'm sure other people have heard something I've heard, that children outgrow it. Is that true?
No, and that's what's new in our book. It used to be thought that you outgrow ADD during puberty. Now we know that only about a third of children outgrow it, and that the majority, about 2/3, continue to have attention deficit disorder into adulthood. And what's exciting is to begin to look at these adults and offer them the help of a diagnosis, as opposed to the negative labels they've carried with them, like I'm lazy or stupid or can't get my act together.
And they've lived this whole life and never had it diagnosed. How do you diagnose it then? What are the questions you ask? What do you look for?
The key to the diagnosis is the history. There's no test. There's no magical X-ray or CAT scan.
Or blood test or anything like that.
There's nothing like that. The key to the diagnosis, it's like the diagnosis of depression. It depends upon your history, the intensity and the duration of the symptoms. Everyone's been sad. That doesn't mean everyone is depressed. It's the intensity and the duration. So it is with ADD. Everyone has been distractible, impulsive, restless, but that doesn't mean everyone has ADD. If they have been those very intensely and for their entire lives, then they may have the attention deficit disorder.
And in fact, there are those who are calling, I'm sure you've heard this, it's the disease of the week, invented by psychiatrists. The cause of behavioral, emotional, and learning disorders often have multiple causes, and by nature, they're open to subjective interpretation.
Well, they may have said that about nearsightedness when it was first discovered, too. This is not the disease of the week. It's been with us for centuries and will be with us.
We're just learning about it.
The reason that it's receiving so much attention now is that we've learned a great deal more in the past decade than we've ever known before.
Often treated with Ritalin. What is Ritalin, and does it have side effects?
Ritalin is one of the many medications that's used to treat ADD. When it's used properly, it is extremely safe. Ritalin does pretty much what a pair of glasses does. It helps the individual focus better. And when it's used properly, the worst side effect is that it wears off in about 4 hours.
Some people say that it causes violence.
No, just the opposite. Some people who have ADD are predisposed toward impulsive or violent behavior. It's not the Ritalin that's causing it, it's the Ritalin that's being used to help try to contain it.
I should just point out, you also have ADD, right?
Yes, I do.
What age were you when you got diagnosed?
I was
an adult or a child?
Oh, an adult. I'd known I had dyslexia since the first grade, but it wasn't until I'd finished Harvard College medical school and I was doing a fellowship in child psychiatry that I opened a book one day and I said, my God, there's a name for it, and realized that I had this thing called attention deficit disorder. All
right, we're going to break for a moment. We'll have more on attention deficit disorder and meet two people who've dealt with it firsthand when we come back.
It's that time of year again. It's time for Goldberg's Big Easter Sale. For ladies' shoes and handbags, shop the Big Easter Sale. For men's shoes, shop the big Easter sale. For children's shoes, shop the big Easter sale. For sportswear, shop Goldberg's big Easter sale. There's a Goldberg's near you. Greenwood, Greenville, and Indianola. Goldberg's since 1921.
In Oklahoma City, the U.S. Postal Service and the University of Central Oklahoma celebrate the 50th anniversary of Rodgers and Hammerstein's musical, Oklahoma.
Postage stamps have celebrated hundreds of events across this great nation. Recognizing the importance that music plays in our American culture, the Postal Service this year introduced a new category of commemorative stamps, the Legend of American Music Series. Today, we celebrate American music, recognizing one of the most popular and influential of all Broadway musicals, Oklahoma.
This year is also the 100th anniversary of Oklahoma's Cherokee Strip land run that opened 6.5 million acres for settlement. New this month, 2 commemorative stamps that bring back all the music and excitement.
Your world, your country, it matters. Peter Jennings, America's most watched anchor. Your state, your town, it matters.
Newswatch 6, joined by Live at 5 and Night Watch. News matters, and it matters where you get your news. World News Tonight with Peter Jennings at 5:30. And Newswatch 6 now at 5, 6, and 10, because in the Delta...
Right now, we are back talking with Dr. Edward Hallowell, the co-author of Driven to Distraction, a new book about attention deficit disorder, a genetic neurological syndrome we've been hearing a lot about these days. Also joining us now, 2 women whose lives have been touched by ADD. Sally Jackson, who had no idea she had it until her diagnosis just a year and a half ago, and Lynn Bliss. 2 of her 5 children have the disorder. Nice to have you with us. Sally, all this time, and just a little over a year ago, you finally find out you've had it?
Yes, I was always a daydreamer in school, and I was kind of a C average student with a smattering of A's and F's depending on my interest level. And I think as you get older, you get to take more electives. So I was lucky enough to find a career where it was okay to have to be distracted. I do public relations. I have a dozen clients. So I'm always shifting my attention. So
what you got in trouble for as a child, stop doing that, you were actually able to use...
Well, I was never hyperactive. I think in girls, they tend not to be hyperactive. I was a little bit of the class clown, and I was a daydreamer.
Well, and what led you to Dr. Hallowell?
Oh, it's perfect. It's cinema verite. I was sitting in my office one night. I was on the phone, editing a press release, eating dinner, and watching television. Perfect. And Dr. Hallowell was on television. So I wrote his name in the margin of the press release, finished my phone call, my dinner, and the news, and then called him. And I said, I think I'm going to be the ADD poster child here, because I had all the symptoms.
And what did you ask her? Was this a quick diagnosis? Was it apparent?
No, and that's important to emphasize. This is not a quick diagnosis. I had certainly a feel for it over the telephone. Sally called me up and said, I'm your person. I have this syndrome, but it's a diagnosis that has to be made very carefully.
And you started taking Ritalin. Mm-hmm. Now, how has that changed your life?
It's remarkable. I only take it during the week, and I really just take it for work, but it has improved my productivity, it's improved my ability to concentrate, and it's improved my relationships with my coworkers, because I used to drive them nuts. They'd come into my office for meetings, and I'd be like a cat with,
So now you feel like you can focus?
I can focus. The quality of my work is better. And I used to be the one in meetings who'd leave 5 times during a meeting. I can actually sit through a meeting now.
Lynn, does this sound... You have 5 children,
5.
The two boys. What were their ages when they were diagnosed?
The older one, who's now 23, was 13.
Okay.
Well, actually, it wasn't diagnosis when we realized something was really wrong.
And what was going on that you say you realized something was wrong?
Oh, it was sad. He wasn't hyperactive like Sally. He was very drifty, dreamy, appealing little boy, and all during grade school.
Or...
No. Lively, loved literature, stories, very bright. And suddenly, school started to count, and we put him in Latin in 7th grade, and he just couldn't do it. He couldn't memorize. Teachers thought he wouldn't, but it was he
See,
couldn't.
that's so often the
And
case.
lazy, he won't do it. He must. What he'd do is he would take English words and add Latin endings and make great sounding sentences and fail.
Sally's smiling over here because it all sounds familiar to her.
So there's the mischievousness, but it was sort of desperation, and it kept going.
What did you do with, what was the...
We struggled till he was a senior in high school. Teachers, he went from being thought of as, come on, Tim, you can do it, to, Tim's a bad kid. My brother, when Tim was a senior, my brother went to a lecture that Dr. Hallowell gave on attention deficit disorder. Turns out my brother also has it. He didn't know, and he called me and said, boy, you ought to go see this guy. It sounds like Tim. And so we took Tim to Dr. Hallowell, and we had a long talk. We felt so sad. And he started to laugh and said, I think I can help you.
But did I just hear that, is this hereditary at all, or do we know?
We think it's genetically transmitted. The best evidence is that it is.
Going through all this, now, did he take Ritalin?
He took Ritalin. He was failing physics. He had a great teacher that was dynamic and jumped around, and so he could pay attention. And the teacher said, I really think he gets it, but he fails every test. So they're going to kick him out of physics in November. Dr. Hallowell started him on Ritalin on a Friday. He studied through the weekend. He got an A on his exam, his big midterm. He went on to graduate from high school, just graduated from college.
Was it easier then to diagnose it in the second child, having gone through that?
Sure, we were waiting for it.
How do you all deal with the skepticism? I mean, there is skepticism about this, that it just doesn't exist.
Well, it's sort of it's the skepticism that runs through the Calvinist ethic in this country. How could anything so simple exist? You should just work harder, try harder. It's like it's like telling someone who's nearsighted, don't wear glasses, squint harder. And there is a tendency we have to come back to self-reliance. This is not an excuse. Attention deficit disorder is not an excuse, but it is a very valid, biologically provable explanation for why a number of children and adults underachieve, are not reaching the fullest potential due to distractibility.
Yeah, if they could just focus, and I guess so. If you're out there and you hear that you think you may have this, or your children, you can go and get